They say there was a night when Martin Luther King Jr. walked into a warm Harlem townhouse, and before his coat even slipped from his shoulders, Muhammad Ali decided, without shouting, without spectacle, that the preacher's words meant nothing against batons, nothing against police dogs, nothing against laws written by hands that never had to bleed. The door shut heavy behind them. The sound felt final. 9 men stood or sat in a tight parlor filled with cigar smoke, old leather chairs, and the uneasy silence of people who understood they were about to witness something dangerous. Not violence, but collision. Outside, winter pressed against the windows. Inside, pride did. Ali was already there, tall, restless, dressed sharp, pacing like he was still inside a ring no one else could see. When he turned toward Martin, the room instinctively leaned with him. He didn't greet him. He didn't smile. "While you're preaching," Ali said, voice controlled but edged, "they're still beating us in the streets." The sentence landed like a thrown glove. Martin stood still, listening first as he always did. He heard not just anger, but impatience. Years of it. The kind that grows when you watch change move slower than suffering. "I do not confuse love with surrender," Martin replied calmly. Ali gave a short laugh that carried no joy. He stepped closer. "But they do," he shot back. "They hear you say love, and they hear weakness. They hear patience, and they hear permission. While you're building a dream, they're building more prisons." One of the suited men near the fireplace shifted, trying to ease the tension, but Ali cut him off with a glance. This wasn't for spectators. "I'm talking to him." The air thickened. Martin's posture remained steady, but there was iron beneath it now. "My work has never been comfort," he said quietly. "My work is disruption." Ali shook his head. "Expose what?" he demanded. "Everybody already knows. The question is what makes them stop." He tapped his chest once. "Fear makes them stop. Consequences make them stop. They don't respect prayers. They respect power." The room froze. "When a man swings at you," Ali pressed, stepping even closer, "do you write him a poem, or do you hit him back?" Martin did not retreat. His eyes held steady. "If I teach a man that salvation lies in striking back," he said, voice low but firm, "then I have only trained him to live forever in the language of his oppressor." A silence spread across the room like smoke. Ali's jaw tightened. This wasn't just disagreement, it felt personal. "You sound brave," Ali said, softer now but sharper. "But maybe it's just fear dressed up as faith." A few men inhaled sharply. That line crossed something. Martin's expression didn't crack, though something flickered behind his calm. "You think I have not known fear?" he asked evenly. "You think I have not buried nights listening for footsteps at my door?" Ali didn't blink. "Strategy doesn't stop bullets," he said. "And violence does?" Martin countered. Ali pointed at him, firm, accusing. "At least violence answers them in a language they understand." The fireplace snapped. Someone set down a glass too hard. The 9 men in that room could feel it now. This wasn't about ego alone. It was about philosophy, about 2 visions of strength staring each other down. "You inspire hope," Ali continued. "I inspire consequences." "And what happens," Martin replied, "when consequence becomes the only voice we speak?" Ali's eyes flashed. "What happens when words become nothing?" The question hung heavy. Martin took a slow breath. Not theatrical, not sermon-like, just measured. "You believe my words are soft," he said, "but they terrify those who depend on violence. Because words can turn crowds. Words can turn children. Words can turn history." Ali stepped in so close their shoulders nearly touched. "History remembers champions," he said, "not sermons." "And yet," Martin answered quietly, "it is sermons that change what champions fight for." For a moment, neither moved. The men in the room had begun to separate in their minds, some nodding toward Ali's urgency, others clinging to Martin's steadiness, but no one dared interrupt. Ali leaned forward 1 final inch. "Your words," he said, low and controlled, "don't mean a damn thing to the people swinging the clubs." The sentence cut deep. It wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. Martin looked at him, calm but unyielding. and let silence stretch between them until it became almost unbearable. Fear, he said at last, can make a man kneel, but it cannot make him change. Alli's stare hardened. And love can? He asked. Martin did not blink. Love, he answered, is not surrender. It is strategy. The door behind them felt sealed now. Whatever was happening in that Harlem townhouse had already crossed a line from debate into something raw. Two different definitions of strength refusing to bow. And Alli wasn't finished. The silence after Martin's last word did not cool the room. It sharpened it. Alli stepped back just enough to look at him fully, not as a legend, not as a symbol, but as a man. The pacing stopped. The performance dropped. By showing we're not afraid to use it. Martin's eyes darkened slightly. You believe strength is measured by how hard we strike. I believe strength is measured by whether they think twice before striking us, Alli answered instantly. The tension had shifted now. No longer loud, no longer explosive, but sharper, more dangerous. This was not two men arguing for pride. This was two strategies fighting for legitimacy. Alli stepped closer again. You know what I think? He said, voice lowering. I think you're too concerned with being righteous. And you're not? Martin asked calmly. Alli smiled thinly. I'm concerned with being effective. The word hung there like a challenge. One of the older men near the fireplace cleared his throat. Champ, Dr. King has faced prison. Threats? Alli turned sharply. I know what he's faced, he said, but I also know this. Every time somebody sees a brother refuse to hit back, it teaches them something. And what does it teach? Martin asked. That we'll always absorb it. That was the first moment the room truly split. Two men nodded subtly at Alli's words. Another lowered his eyes in disagreement. The air felt divided down the middle. Martin took a slow step forward. You mistake discipline for submission, he said quietly. Nonviolence is not passive. It is controlled confrontation. Alli's eyes narrowed. Confrontation without consequence is theater. Martin did not raise his voice. Consequences do not only come from fists, he said. They come from exposing injustice so completely that it cannot hide. Alli leaned in once more. And if they don't care about hiding? The question landed heavy. Martin held his gaze. Then we make the world care. Alli exhaled sharply, frustrated. You think the world saves us? No, Martin answered. But the world watches, and power changes when it is seen. Alli's shoulders stiffened. You want witnesses, he said. I want results. And you believe they are separate? Martin asked. For the first time since the argument began, Alli hesitated. Not long, not visibly enough for everyone to notice, but enough. He looked at Martin differently now, less dismissive, more analytical. You inspire hope, Alli said again, quieter this time. But hope doesn't scare anyone. Martin's reply came without delay. It scares those who depend on despair. The room fell still again. Alli shook his head slowly. Hope doesn't stop a man swinging a club. No, Martin agreed softly. But it stops a nation from swinging forever. Alli's jaw tightened. The frustration was no longer just about philosophy. It was about time, about urgency, about watching suffering continue while debates continued with it. You talk about tomorrow, Alli said. I'm worried about tonight. And I, Martin answered, am building a tomorrow where tonight does not repeat. They stood there, inches apart. Two different definitions of strength refusing to bend. Alli finally stepped back, crossing his arms. Maybe, he said, voice lower but still sharp, your problem is you still believe they can change. Martin did not hesitate. I know they can. Alli stared at him. And if you're wrong? Martin's answer came like a stone placed deliberately on a table. Then we will still have chosen not to become them. The words settled heavy across the room. Alli looked at him, long, searching, and for the first time there was no laughter, no mockery, just doubt. But doubt did not mean surrender, not yet. The word fear did not fade. It settled into the room like something alive. Alli studied Martin differently now, no longer dismissing him, but searching for fracture. You say we won't become them, Alli said, voice lower but sharper. But what if refusing to strike back isn't moral strength? What if it's just fear dressed up as faith? Several men shifted. That wasn't philosophy anymore. That was personal. Martin did not react at once. He let the silence stretch. You think I do not feel anger? He asked quietly. I think you bury it, Alli replied. Martin's eyes darkened slightly. I have felt anger so heavy it could swallow a man whole, he said. I have stood in the remains of my own home after it was bombed. I have watched my children ask questions no child should ask. The room went still. And I chose restraint, Martin continued, not because I am unafraid, but because I understand what fear does when it leads. Alli stepped closer. And what does it do? It makes men strike blindly, Martin answered. It fractures movements. It turns righteous anger into something easy to manipulate. Alli shook his head. Or it makes people finally take you seriously. You think violence shortens suffering? Martin asked. I think it forces negotiation. No, Martin said firmly. It forces retaliation. That word hung heavy. Alli paced once, restless energy rising again. You stand in front of crowds asking them to absorb blows in the name of moral high ground, he said. That's easy to preach, harder to live. Do not mistake visibility for safety, Martin replied evenly. The threats I receive are not symbolic. My name is spoken in rooms that wish for my silence. Alli held his gaze. Then why not show them we can hit back? Because once you teach a generation that redemption comes through force, Martin said, you cannot later ask them to put it down. Alli's jaw tightened. Maybe you don't trust people with strength. I trust them with discipline, Martin answered. Strength without discipline becomes chaos. Or freedom, Alli shot back. Power without principle, Martin corrected. The 9 men in the room felt the divide sharpening. Alli leaned in again. If a man attacks you tonight, right now, do you defend yourself? I protect life, Martin said calmly. So you believe in force. I believe in restraint. Alli exhaled through his teeth. Restraint looks like weakness to people who hate you. And aggression looks like desperation, Martin replied. That landed harder than either expected. For the first time, Alli hesitated. You think I'm desperate? He asked. I think you're tired, Martin said quietly. Tired of watching injustice move slowly. Tired of patience being mistaken for passivity. Alli did not deny it. And you're not tired? He pressed. Martin's voice softened. I am exhausted, he admitted. The admission shifted something in the room. But exhaustion, he continued, is not permission to abandon wisdom. Alli's gaze drifted briefly to his own hands. Hands that had commanded arenas, hands that had made men fear him. When I step into a ring, he said quietly, people listen. And when you step out of it, Martin asked, they still listen. Yes, Martin agreed, but they listen differently. Alli's eyes narrowed. You really believe love changes the men swinging those clubs? I believe it exposes them, Martin said. And when injustice is exposed long enough, it cannot survive in darkness. And if they don't care, then the world will. Alli shook his head, though softer now. You put a lot of faith in the world. I put faith, Martin replied, in what happens when people see clearly. Alli crossed his arms again, but the fire in him had cooled into something more complicated. You're asking people to suffer strategically, he said. I am asking them to suffer purposefully, Martin answered. Alli stared at him. And you're certain that's courage? Martin met his eyes without hesitation. It is the hardest courage there is. The room fell silent again. Alli did not concede. Not yet. But for the first time that night, he was no longer certain that words were nothing. The fire had burned lower, but the room felt hotter. Alli stood still now, no longer pacing, arms loose at his sides, eyes locked on Martin with the focus of a fighter who had realized this was not a quick exchange. This was a long fight, and it was not happening with fists. You call it the hardest courage, Alli said slowly, but courage is stepping into a ring, knowing someone's trying to knock you unconscious. Martin did not smile. No, he replied quietly. Courage is stepping into a street knowing someone is trying to provoke you into becoming what they expect. Alli's jaw tightened again, but this time the reaction wasn't pure resistance, it was recognition. You think I'm playing their game? He said. I think, Martin answered carefully, that they understand violence better than we do, because they built the system around it. The men in the room felt the shift. This wasn't about morality anymore. It was about structure, about control. Allie's eyes narrowed. So what? We let them control the terms forever? No, Martin said. We refuse the terms entirely. Alli tilted his head. That sounds poetic, he muttered. It is practical, Martin replied. The word practical hung in the air unexpectedly heavy. You believe your fists scare them, Martin continued, his voice steady but gaining weight. And they do. But fear creates defense. It creates counterforce. It creates escalation. And your speeches don't? Alli shot back. They create scrutiny, Martin answered. They create witnesses. They create doubt inside the very system that depends on certainty. Alli's breathing slowed. He was listening now, not agreeing, but listening. You think doubt is stronger than fear? He asked. Yes, Martin said without hesitation. Because fear unites people against a threat. Doubt divides them from within. That sentence settled deep. A man near the window leaned back slowly, as if the ground beneath the conversation had shifted. Alli studied Martin's face carefully. You're saying, he said, choosing the words more carefully now, that if we strike, they get to justify everything. Yes, Martin replied. They say, see, we were right. They tighten their grip. They expand their power. And if we don't strike, then every blow they deliver becomes evidence. Alli's eyes flickered slightly. Not surrender, but calculation. You really believe the system can be pressured from the outside without breaking it from the inside? Martin took a slow breath. I believe the system cannot survive being exposed to its own hypocrisy. Alli glanced briefly around the room, at the suited men, at the careful faces. And you think they'll turn on themselves? I think power fears losing legitimacy more than it fears losing control. The room fell quiet again. Alli walked toward the fireplace this time, looking into the low flames. His reflection trembled in the glass above it. You know what happens in a ring, he said quietly, not looking back. If you show hesitation, you get knocked out. And what happens, Martin asked gently, if you swing at every movement? Alli didn't answer immediately. You exhaust yourself, Martin continued. You leave openings. Alli turned slowly. So your plan is patience. My plan, Martin said, stepping forward slightly, is precision. That word landed. Precision? Alli repeated. Yes, Martin said. Not passive endurance, directed pressure, strategic non-cooperation, economic disruption, public confrontation, without surrendering moral authority. Alli stared at him. You think moral authority matters to men with clubs? It matters to the nation watching them swing, Martin replied. Alli's pride fought back. And if the nation doesn't care? Martin's voice deepened, not louder but fuller. Then we force them to see. Alli held his gaze, long, searching. And if seeing changes nothing, then at least we will not have taught our children that brutality is the path to dignity. That sentence struck harder than any before. The men in the room felt it, because this was no longer about tactics. It was about legacy. Alli exhaled slowly. You're asking for faith, he said. No, Martin corrected. I am asking for discipline. The difference hung between them. Alli stepped closer again, but this time without aggression. You really believe, he said, that controlling your strength is stronger than using it? Martin's eyes were steady. The strongest man, he said quietly, is not the one who can destroy. It is the one who chooses not to. The words settled over the room like weight. Alli didn't laugh, didn't argue immediately. For the first time that night, his confidence wasn't loud. It was internal, evaluating. He looked down at his own hands again, hands that had built a legend, then back at Martin. You're saying my strength isn't enough. I am saying, Martin replied calmly, it could be greater. The room went silent, because that was not an insult. It was an invitation. Alli stood there, pride colliding with possibility, and for the first time since the door had closed, the fight felt less like opposition and more like a decision waiting to be made. The fire had almost burned down to embers. The room was quieter now, but not calmer. Quieter in the way a storm grows quiet before deciding which direction it will move. Alli stood motionless for several seconds, looking at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. The confidence was still there, but something had shifted beneath it. Not doubt exactly, something heavier. "You really think," he said finally without lifting his eyes, "that controlling strength is greater than using it?" Martin did not rush to answer. "Yes," he said at last, "because control creates direction, uncontrolled power creates reaction." Alli looked up slowly. "And you think I don't have control?" "I think," Martin replied carefully, "you have influence beyond your fists." The men in the room leaned in slightly. That was not criticism. It was recognition. Alli's jaw tightened, but not in anger this time. "You're saying I'm wasting it." "I am saying," Martin answered calmly, "that your voice carries further than your punches ever could." Alli gave a faint, almost involuntary scoff. "People don't come to hear me whisper about love," he said. "They come because you command attention," Martin replied. "What you do with that attention determines its power." Alli walked slowly toward the window, looking out into the dark street below. The city was quiet, unaware of the argument unfolding inside. "You know what scares me," Alli said quietly. The room stilled again. "That they don't care," he continued. "That they can watch peaceful marches, watch people kneel, watch people bleed, and still sleep fine." Martin's voice softened. "Some will," he said, "but not all." "And if it's not enough?" Alli asked. "Movements are not built on everyone," Martin answered. "They are built on enough." Alli turned back toward him. "You talk like history is patient." "History is shaped," Martin replied. "By who?" Alli challenged. "By those who refuse to become what they fight." The words were not dramatic. They were steady, and that steadiness carried weight. Alli exhaled slowly, shoulders lowering just slightly. "I've built my life proving I'm not what they say I am," he said. "Strong, loud, unafraid." "And you are," Martin acknowledged, "but you're asking me to show strength differently." "Yes." Alli's eyes searched Martin's face for arrogance, for manipulation, found neither. "You think I could move people without threatening them," he said. "I think," Martin replied, "that when you speak, they listen. And when you align your strength with restraint, you create something they cannot dismiss as rage." Alli was silent for a long moment. The 9 men in that room could feel it. The argument was no longer about winning. It was about choice. "You believe," Alli said slowly, "that fear only hardens the system." "Yes." "And that doubt weakens it." "Yes." Alli stepped closer again, but this time there was no aggression in it. "What if you're wrong?" he asked quietly. Martin met his eyes. "Then we will have chosen dignity over domination." The answer was simple, unshakable. Alli stared at him, not as an opponent now, but as something harder to categorize. "You really believe they can change," he said. "I believe systems crack when enough light reaches them," Martin answered. Alli's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "And you think I could help with that?" "I know you could." The room felt different now. Not tense, but suspended. Alli glanced around at the others. The suited men, the silent observers. Some had leaned toward him earlier. Now they seemed uncertain which way they stood. He looked back at Martin. "I thought your words were just words," he admitted slowly. No one spoke. "I thought fists moved the world." Martin did not interrupt. "But maybe," Alli continued, voice quieter than it had been all night, "words decide where it moves." The admission did not come with surrender. It came with reluctance. But it was real. Martin nodded slightly. "Strength takes many forms," he said. Alli gave a faint, almost reluctant smile. "Don't get used to that," he muttered. A few quiet laughs escaped the tension in the room, but the shift had happened. Not full agreement, not alignment, but respect. And respect is harder to earn than victory. The fire collapsed into glowing embers. The fight, it seemed, had changed shape. The embers in the fireplace glowed low and red, casting long shadows against the walls. And for a moment, no one in the room moved, as if everyone understood that something fragile had just shifted and any careless word might shatter it. Alli stood facing Martin, shoulders no longer squared for combat, but not lowered either. The pride was still there. It had not disappeared, but it was no longer armored. It was exposed. "I thought your words were nothing," Alli said clearly now, loud enough for every man in the room to hear. "I thought speeches don't stop clubs. I thought fear was the only thing they respect." The admission settled heavily across the 9 witnesses. Martin did not step forward. He did not claim victory. He simply waited. "But I see something tonight," Alli continued, voice steady. "I see that fear might make them hesitate, but it won't make them change." One of the suited men near the window shifted immediately. "That's not entirely true," he interjected. "Power responds to pressure." Another man shook his head. "Pressure, yes, but pressure doesn't have to be violence." The room began to stir again. Alli raised a hand slightly, not to silence, but to steady. "I still believe strength matters," he said firmly. "I still believe we can't look weak." "No one here has called you weak," one of the older men added quickly. Alli ignored the comment. His eyes remained on Martin. "But maybe strength isn't just how hard you can hit," he went on. "Maybe it's how hard you can stand without swinging." The sentence felt strange coming from him. The room felt it. Martin's expression remained composed, but there was something warmer in it now. Not triumph, but recognition. A younger voice near the bookshelf spoke up. "So who's right?" he asked. "Force or faith?" "Both," someone else answered sharply. "You need both." "No," another man countered. "Violence will only justify them." "And patience gets people killed," came a reply from across the room. The debate broke open. Not chaotic, but intense. Alli watched them argue. Some leaned toward him, some leaned toward Martin. The divide that had formed earlier had not disappeared. It had simply become more honest. "You see?" one of the businessmen said to Alli. "Even now, you're the proof. When you fight, they pay attention. And when he speaks," another responded, gesturing toward Martin, "they listen." Alli's jaw flexed slightly. He turned back to Martin. "I still don't agree with everything," he said. "I don't think the world changes just because you ask it to." "I don't ask it," Martin replied calmly. "I confront it." Alli gave a slow nod. "And I challenge it," he said. "Yes," Martin agreed. The room quieted again. Alli took a breath and addressed everyone this time. "I was wrong about one thing," he said clearly. "I said words don't mean anything to the people swinging the clubs." No one interrupted. "But maybe the clubs aren't the only audience." That line landed differently. Martin inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the shift without exploiting it. One of the older men crossed his arms thoughtfully. "So what are you saying, champ?" Alli's answer came steady. "I'm saying fists might move bodies," he said, "but words move direction." The room absorbed it. "And direction," Martin added quietly, "determines destiny." A few men exchanged glances. Some nodded, some remained skeptical. "You're both idealists," one voice muttered. "Or realists," another replied. The argument among the witnesses continued, not hostile, but unresolved. Some believed fear was necessary. Others believed fear poisoned movements from the inside. No consensus formed, and perhaps that was the point. Alli extended his hand at last, not as a fighter offering a rematch, not as a man surrendering, but as one kind of strength acknowledging another. Martin took it. The handshake was firm, equal, without dominance. The embers in the fireplace cracked softly, the only sound in the room for a long second. Outside, Harlem remained quiet. The city did not know what had happened in that guarded townhouse. No headlines would carry it. No cameras had recorded it. But 9 men had witnessed it. 2 different definitions of power had collided, and neither had destroyed the other. As the coats were gathered and the door finally opened again to the cold night air, the debate among the witnesses continued in hushed tones. "Fear forces change," someone insisted. "Doubt forces reflection," another countered. Alli paused briefly at the doorway, glancing once more at Martin. "Next time," he said with a faint grin, "don't expect me to go easy." Martin's reply was soft but unshaken. "I never do." The door closed behind them, and somewhere between fists and faith, the future waited. shaped not by a single answer, but by the tension between both.